two airheads and a boxer. Can these two airheads turn this boxer into this race bike? Episode 8, the engine teardown.
Alright, hello, and welcome to episode 8 of Two Airheads and a Boxer.
Airhead 2, Airhead 1.
You don't have a boxing joke?
Boxer. No boxing joke today.
We're running out of boxers. We'll have to go back through the history and find some boxers and maybe come up with some better jokes. But episode 8, so basically you've seen all the previous episodes. The entire bike is torn down and apart over there on the ground. And we've got the engine out. So what we're going to do here today is now further break down the engine, essentially, and the transmission basically down to its base bare parts.
Pretty much,
We need to get all the guts out, and then we're going to obviously send the exterior out to be cleaned and probably Cerakoted and stuff. And then we've got to figure out what we can salvage from inside here if we need to get any replacement parts. So walk us through this real quick.
Basically, the main thing we're going to do today is remove the transmission, go over how the clutch works, and get it all out. That's going to be the brunt of this episode, getting these two pieces separated right here. There's really only 4 bolts, but then there's the clutch and going over operation and how it all works.
Right. So hopefully it'll probably be a little short and easy one today, but this is the last thing we basically need to do to get down to where we want to start cleaning things up and then building it back up into the race bike that we want. So we'll be right back in a second for tearing down the engine and the transmission.
Hey everybody, today we're going to pull the transmission out. And we've already done this, so the clutch is already disassembled, but when we get it apart, we'll show you everything that goes into the clutch. Just wanted to make sure that we didn't run into any surprises getting it apart. Mainly there's 4 bolts holding the transmission on. There's 2 at the top here and 2 at the bottom here. This one at the bottom is a little tricky. It takes either an Allen wrench or a ball head socket to get to get around the shift lever there. But once you get it finger loose, it comes up pretty easily. This one on this side, the top one on this side is a 12 millimeter. It also holds in the air cleaner housing. Right side of the air cleaner housing. When that's all there. Keep all the washers and nuts together. Thank you for that hand, Jeff. And then the transmission slides right out the back like that. Here's your input shaft. A little bit of grease and dirt and grime in there. You're probably going to have a lot of dirt and stuff in there because the transmission or the clutch is very much like a brake material. It leaves dust everywhere. I'm going to set this over here. Now, with the clutch, there are 6 bolts on the flywheel, or on the pressure plate. Thought I had the right size. Like I said, we've already gone through and taken all this out, so the spring plate is already out. That way, it's not going to explode. But one of the very important things when you're doing this is to take apart in opposite ends. So don't work your way around, because then it'll come out at a really funky angle and potentially do some damage and bend the pressure plate. And when you're getting the last 2, what you want to do is loosen them like this, a little bit at a time on each one. And then it's going to come out. Now, this spring plate right here, rides right there, rides up against your pressure plate right here, and normally sits like that. We don't have our clutch alignment tool yet, so we couldn't put it all back together and get it all lined up. That's why we left the spring out, was so that the clutch disc would stay separate. Basically, this is your clutch disc, or your pressure plate, your clutch disc, and then this is the other side of the pressure plate. And when you press the clutch in, rod on the inside of the clutch shaft goes right in through here and pushes it this way, relieving the pressure on this, allowing it to spin freely in there. As you can see, we've got a good bit of surface rust in there. We're going to replace all these parts when we replace the clutch anyways. Don't know how many miles this clutch has on it, but it is looking a little thin. So all this is going to be fully replaced when before we put the transmission back in with all new fresh parts. Okay. All right, and we're back. Now we're going to strip the front end of the motor. We're going to get the alternator off, the regulator rectifier. Normally there'd be points here, but this has already been upgraded with an electronic ignition, so we're going to get all this stuff off, get this front cover off. So that basically what we're left with is just the motor. We've taken a good look at the internals from what we can see through the bearing cam followers, lifters, and in the crank. I believe the inside of this motor has been gone through, I'm not going to say recently, but since it was originally built. And everything looks like it's in really good shape. Probably what we're going to end up doing is leaving most of the internals alone, just because there's a lot of really expensive tools and a lot of complex stuff to put it all back together when it's done. And I believe in the theory of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And right. I don't think anything on the inside is broken. So we're going to get this off, get it stripped down, get it cleaned up, and be able to put it back together with a good-looking machine, that runs and is clean and isn't going to catch fire from all the oil on here. So first thing we're going to do is pull the cap off, the top cover off, which is literally just these two bolts right here. And that lifts off. And here's our starter, our oil breather system. We'll get all that stuff off of here eventually, but right now we're going to focus primarily on the front of this motor and getting all of this off. So let's get the regulator rectifier. Of course, if your motor is still in the bike and you're doing this, always disconnect the battery. You should have had it disconnected long before you got to this point, but just in case you want to keep it disconnected because we don't want to short circuit anything. So I'm going to start by unplugging the wires. I'm getting those out. Four little bolts right here. Mount this to the front cover. feeding the harness for this out. This is one of our wires for the electronic ignition that was added. Whoever added it decided to tangle it in between some of these wires. So we're just going to keep that separate over there. But we're going to get the harness for this out. And there's a regulator rectifier all out.
Sweet.
As you can see, we're getting some separation of the wire, or some wiring harnesses. We're able to start getting separated. Now this is a starter. This black wire running right here goes into your starter engager or engagement solenoid. So get that out, and now we're, as you can see, we're starting to peel the wiring harness back down. This is the other side of the starter. So we're going to feed that out. Let's see. I'm going to start pulling off the alternator cover. There are 3 bolts. Very much like a older car alternator. Just instead of being belt driven, it is driven directly off of the crank. Pair of pliers to assist with that.
Always have the right tool, the right job.
There's a lot of grease and oil in here, and I
Yep.
just can't get a hold of the rubber.
That's what she said.
So now we've got all the wiring harness separate from the cover. Work it back and forth, and it will come off just like that. There's your windings.
How's that looking?
Probably use some cleanup, but I don't see anything that scares me.
We might be able to get away without getting a brand
And
new
the brushes actually look like they're in pretty good shape, so we should be,
Great.
like I said, a lot of cleanup on this.
Yeah, like everything else
but,
is clean, basically, yeah. Hopefully.
Now this is directly hooked to the crank. As you can see, when I turn it, the pistons come in. So we want to limit the turn of the pistons and get this loose. So you hold the crank and loosen the bolt. Now, there's a special tool to remove this. Threaded at this end, not at this end. And you push that in, it will hit the end of the crank, and as you tighten it, it will literally pull this off. This is a pressed-on fit.
Is that a tool you gotta buy online? You can find it at BMW websites or in a local hardware store.
We purchased ours from Fast by Phil.
We'll leave a link to the his website in the description below.
Excuse me.
Ah, jeez.
is a little more delicate than the other one. You don't want to apply. There we go. You don't want to hammer it off, but once it comes off, you see this conical fit right here? There is no keyway on that, so it is literally held in just by the tension. And what this does, if you look on the inside of that, this tool protrudes through, sits on the inside of the threads on that. It doesn't damage the threads, it goes inside the threads and pushes it out. And once you get enough pressure, it pops right off just like you saw.
Cool. Thanks. And we'll leave a link to the website below.
So,
Your first link. More to come.
and we want to get all this wiring harness stuff out, so I'm going to grab a screwdriver.
Now, is this unusual amount of dirt and grease and stuff, or are they all pretty much gonna look like that when you take them apart?
You're going to get some dirt, some grease buildup because you've got or some buildup of dust primarily. If you get a little bit of moisture in there or a little bit of oil, you're going to get it's going to turn into a sludge like what we've got here. Part of the reason you're going to get some of that dust is this is an older style alternator design. It actually still uses brushes right here. As those brushes spin, they spin on this armature here. As they spin, they'll wear off a little bit and deposit a little bit of dust. If you go look at an older car alternator, something pre-19, I'm going to say 1995-ish, you start looking at the back of the alternator where the brushes are, you're going to see some dust build up. And it's not going to be as bad because it's not sealed up like the front end of the motorcycle. But you are going to see some buildup in there. So the next thing we need to do is remove our electronic ignition pickups and triggers. And flashlight go. There it is. Now this is really greasy down in here. I don't know why, but if you can see, you've got flathead screw there and a flathead screw there, and that should just come right off. I'm going to get a smaller screwdriver in there. Trying not to damage this wiring harness. I don't want to just pry it off. believe actually sits on that collar right there. So we're gonna have to find a very small Allen wrench that we can fit in there, and we'll be right back. Okay, and we're back. Consulted the manual to figure out exactly how to do this because this is not a factory BMW item. So this 10mm nut on the dyno, got to undo that.
So to be clear, the issue here isn't this isn't for a normal factory BMW takedown. The person had bought an aftermarket ignition and installed it. So we are learning with the old paperwork, because the person actually, believe it or not, still had the old paperwork from 1978 or whatever when they bought it. The manual showing how to install it and how to uninstall it, etc., etc. So we found that in the box of parts that we got from the guy and had to go and consult that. So this is not what you would see on a normal stock BMW removal of these items. This is for the aftermarket parts, so that's why we had a little stumble.
So that once you get the rotor off, this plate, this one was a little stuck. I had to persuade it with a screwdriver, but it comes off along with the rest of your wiring harness.
Great.
So that is our engine wiring harness. Now we're ready to start removing all the bolts that hold the front cover on. And it's 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10 bolts. I believe they are 6mm, 5mm. Nope, 4mm, excuse me. Somewhere I've got a 4mm up here.
Well, we're going to take all those out and then we'll come back when they're done. There's no reason for you to watch 5 minutes of bolt removal. Go.
All right, so we've gotten all the nuts and bolts out. There's bolts, 2 nuts, nut, bolt, bolt, and bolt. You want to make sure you get all of the washers out with them. But then a little light persuasion. You don't want to beat on it. If you have to beat on it, then you forgot something. And it should walk right out. 2 seals you're contending with here and here. And there we go. And this is our cam chain. This is our cam chain. Basically, this is the end of the crankshaft. This is the end of the camshaft. This little spider gear here is our tachometer drive gear. Chain tensioner. All this stuff looks like it's in really good shape. Again, like I said again, Jeff.
It's like the cleanest looking part of the bike.
Yeah, you know, the inside of the motor looks really good. A little bit of oil leaking out. We'll get a rag there. But, you know, everything looks like it's in really good shape. I don't see any reason that we should really go much further into the engine than this.
Sure.
There's plenty of good tension on the chain. Doesn't appear to be slack or worn. The teeth look like they're in good shape. I've seen some pictures of some of these that were 100,000 miles and the teeth were starting to wear out, and
sure,
you could move the chain back and forth.
Yeah, it's all pretty clean and shiny almost.
Anyone familiar with most modern American small block engines or big block engines, you're going to recognize this if you flip it over. The crank's going to be on the bottom and the camshaft's going to be on the top in the middle of that big V8. Similar setup. Germans figured if it works for Americans,
sure,
better work for them.
All right. Go.
All right. We're also going to remove the starter so we can, and the breather tube, so we can flip the motor over and get the oil pan off. You want to take a look at the oil pickup while we've got it here. Again, the inside of this motor looks like it's in really good shape. We're probably not going to go much further down than this unless we find something in the oil pump and oil pickup. But removing the starter, 10mm bolt right there, a couple of 13s or 12s, I think the 12th actually, right up here, and then 2 4mm Allens right here to remove the breather. That'll give us a flat surface. We can flip the motor upside down and be able to pull the oil pan off very easily without making much more of a mess. All right, so we've got the motor flipped over. We've got it sitting on a couple blocks so we don't mess up the breather because it still has the shaft coming out the top. So we've already gone ahead and removed all of the 10mm bolts holding the oil pan on.
There's a whole bunch of them, as you can see, but they're all 10mm, so just out they come.
Based on the amount of gasket sealant that came out, I'm guessing this is probably going to need a little bit of persuasion. Light persuasion to knock it off. You don't want to hit it too hard because you don't want to hit the oil pickup and damage this. But there's the inside of the oil pan. Got a little bit of sludge in there, but nothing bad. You know, nothing that wouldn't be expected after sitting for so long. Inside of the motor looks good. The screen doesn't look too bad, but yeah, the screen is just got a little bit of residual oil on it. Wipes right off. Nothing plugging it, nothing clogging it. That's the important thing. I was really hoping I wasn't going to find any bits of metal and stuff that was clogged up in there, and I'm not, so I'm real happy with this. So now we're just going to clean this thing up, put new gaskets on it, put the oil pan back on, clean the oil pan, of course, but get all that taken care of.
All right. Is that about as far as we're going to go with the engine?
Based on what I'm seeing on the inside of this motor, this is as far as I'm going to go into it. I don't see any need to pull the crankshaft out to do anything. We are going to pull the pistons and connecting rods, check the bearing surfaces there. If we find something bad on the bearing surfaces, the connecting rods, we'll dig a little deeper. But if they look good, we're gonna replace the bearings, of course, but we're gonna send it. And you know, I think we've discussed doing a 1000cc upgrade kit on this.
Yep.
So
We're
obviously
going to race it. We're going to jack it up.
Yep. Obviously new pistons, new cylinders. We're going to use the same heads. We're going to send the heads off. We may have the larger valves of the R90S motor put in. We may do the cam. I'm not sure at this point, but
If we do, we'll do a video on it.
yep.
But for now, basically, yeah, we're going to replace the pistons because we're going to get the higher compression ones, upgrade it to higher CCs since it is going to be a race bike. But the hope is that we can get away with basically replacing those few parts, cleaning the engine, sending it off to get painted so it looks a little bit nicer, but not really tearing down the inside of it since everything seems to be good. So there you go. That is episode 8, breaking down the vast majority of the engine. If we need to get any deeper than that, we'll come back and do another video. But that is about as deep as you probably need to get as long as the internals are working. Like you said, there's no reason if it's not broke, don't fix it. So we'll see you next time on 2 airheads and a boxer.
It's time to start ordering parts. See how long it takes to get them.
Take care.
See you next time on 2 Airheads and a Boxer. Dun, dun, dun.